Hey guys, today on JD Cars, we're going to be beefing up the drive shafts on my 2014 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Sport. So if you guys aren't aware already, the last big project I did on the Jeep here at the end of the summer was installing a rough country 4-inch long arm lift kit along with these 37-inch Nitto trail grapplers. Now, as one can imagine, lifting the vehicle and putting this large of a tire with that much rotational mass on the vehicle really increases the stress on a lot of components, not only just for the weight, but also because the lift changes the geometry of the suspension, as well as some of the driveline components, including the drive shafts. So today we'll be installing a much beefier set of rough country drive shafts, both to improve strength as well as functionality in its ability to operate at different angles. Ked, what do you think about doing the shafts?
It's gonna be a word.
We doing front or rear first? Alright, we'll pick one.
Front.
Just pick a box. Alright, tear it open.
How the fuck? Give me something to tear it open. Like, these things have like staples on them.
Oh yeah.
Wow, look at that packaging. Rough right here. See what that is.
Oh, look at that puppy. Wowza. So this new axle is looking sweet. I'll show you what I mean here. This is a double Cardan joint right here. As you can see, it has 2 pivot points on each side, allowing it to articulate and flex much more than a typical joint. It's also a lot stronger than the stock axle setup. So the drive shaft is looking great. Also included is a new transfer case yoke, as well as a new differential yoke, as well as the necessary hardware to install this. All right, we're gonna pull this puppy in here, get her up on the Max Jacks lift here. As I always say, you do not by any means need a lift to complete this job. You can do this on the ground or on jack stands if you want to give yourself a little bit more room. But nonetheless, gonna pull her in here and we'll start on the rear drive shaft. Now that we have the Jeep up on the lift here, I can much better explain why it is we're doing this. So first off, this is a huge problem. The angle at which the drive shaft is going into the yoke here, it's obscene. It's making contact here. As you can see, this would cause damage if you are off-roading and your suspension dropped to this level. You'd be causing damage to your drive shaft. Furthermore, the drive shaft is hitting the exhaust pipe here. So we don't want that, or at least the boot is, and the boot is gonna get torn or melted. So that's a big issue with the front drive shaft here. This is where the majority of your problems will show up. However, you can still experience issues in the rear. As you can see, our angle is getting pretty aggressive there. Nothing too terrible, but where a lot of people run into issues is back here with the evap skid guard here. Once you lift your Jeep, your rear axle has the ability to move back and forth more. And when that happens, the rear drive shaft here can make contact with the evap skid guard. And a lot of the time this boot will get torn and compromised. So needless to say, it's time to swap out the drive shafts. So let's get to it. So working at the differential end first, we'll be removing 8mm screws. So we're gonna break these 8mm loose by hand first, and then we'll use our electric ratchet. All right, with all the 8mm loose, you wanna give a little tap on this collar, try to break it loose, and then we'll repeat the same process up top there, and then we'll tackle removing the yokes. All right, so we just got this to break loose. What worked for us was using a propane torch, just placing it here at the bottom, spin one of the tires to rotate this yoke, heat up the entire circumference, and then hit it with a hammer and pull on the shaft towards the front of the car, and it broke right loose. So now we're gonna bungee cord this up and go repeat the same process up at the front. All right, we're now gonna be removing the differential yoke using a 1 1/4 socket I'm gonna try to break it loose with my impact wrench here. Not sure if that's gonna work. If not, we'll use a breaker bar and then the impact wrench. So, very much similar to getting the drive shaft out of the yoke, we had to use the propane torch to heat this up. I actually just did it right through the socket here, heated up that bolt and broke it loose with the breaker bar. Now I'm gonna pull it off the rest of the way with the impact. So if your yoke just magically comes off with the hit of a hammer here, that's amazing, but don't go pounding on it because there are important seals inside here that you can damage and bearings. So this is what the puller tool is for. You ideally want a 3-claw puller with one central point that goes into the middle here, and then we'll use our impacts to pull it right off. So I actually borrowed this 2 to 3 jaw puller for free from AutoZone. I put down like a $50 deposit, and when I bring it back, I get that deposit returned. So again, we have these 3 claws. I'll show you how this hooks up. So this is what the puller should look like when it's set up on your yoke. As you can see, we have these 3 claws going around the outside, pulling on the yoke itself, and this central bolt going through and pressing on the shaft there. So in my case, we're just gonna tighten this down with a 16mm socket and my impact. So we have the rear yoke removed from the vehicle. We're now gonna repeat the same exact process up in the front here. Once again, we'll be using a 1 1/4 inch socket to remove this bolt. So we now have the front yoke removed, rear yoke removed as well, along with this washer, and they each have their associated nut. So we're now going to swap these out for the included rough country yokes. This longer, bulkier yoke is going to be attached to the transfer case, whereas this shorter, more compact one goes to the differential. So I just greased these guys up. Just a little bit of grease goes a long way with those splines there. So I'm going to toss these on and reinstall the factory nut and washer for the differential, that is, and the flange nut for the transfer case. So prepping up our yokes here, I already mentioned that I greased the inner splines there. Now we want to apply some red Loctite to this nut here, along with our other yoke hardware, and we'll want to apply some RTV to the back side of this washer that's going to be facing the differential, just to help create a better seal. So for the rear yoke, that nut should be torqued down probably to about 110 foot-pounds. Up here at the transfer case, we're going to need to torque it down to 160 foot-pounds. So get yourself a good torque wrench to do this. Looks like, yeah, I'm going to need an extension. Oh, no, I don't actually. But, yeah, no, I need an extension. All right, let's torque her down. All right, she's torqued down. All right, both yokes are installed. There's like gonna be a little bit of play here, but none in the back and forth motion. Once you get to the point where you lose the play in the back and forth motion and this no longer tightens down, you wanna stop tightening down because you can risk damaging seals in here. So at this point, we're now ready to install this beautiful new drive shaft. So basically the situation for this, up front, where we have the double Cardan set up, we're just gonna be using 4 1/2 inch bolts. We're gonna be putting Loctite on these, and we're gonna send them through the yoke and into the threaded portion of the U-joint here. On the other end, it's a different situation because it's not a double Cardan setup. So we're gonna be securing that using these U-hooks and included nuts. All right, so new drive shaft about halfway bolted up. Up front here, we have 2 of those 1/2 inch bolts installed with Loctite, of course. And in the rear, since the rear tires are off the ground, I was able to just rotate it to rotate the yoke into the proper position to accept the drive shaft here. And I figured I'd take this opportunity to better explain the process here in the rear. As you can see, we insert the drive shaft into the yoke. In between, there are actually 2 little end pieces that kind of cap it in. And do be wary, when you take off the tape, don't let these caps fall off because you'll have bearings everywhere and it'll be a nightmare. So don't let that happen. Be very careful, squeeze these together when you're inserting it into the yoke here. You then secure it using these U-hooks, a lock washer, and the supplied nut along with Loctite. So I'm going to do that on the other side here. I'm going to take this out of 4 low in first gear and be able to rotate the drive shaft to access the 2 other 1/2 inch bolts up front there, and we'll get this all torqued down. All right, so Rear drive shaft is completely installed. Looking great here. I mean, we're not gonna see much of it, but anyways, really psyched about these new joints here. This top double garden joint is just, oh my gosh, thing is super beefy. Really excited to have these installed. I have yet to do the front one, but just to let you know, the front is the same exact process as the rear. The only exception, I believe, is that the nut retaining the yokes is a 1 1/8 opposed to a 1 1/4 in the rear here. But other than that, it's the identical process, just a little bit more difficult for me to show you on camera because of the cross member and skid plate here. You know, same process in the end. Now, I will note it is really important to test drive the vehicle following this and listen carefully for any vibrations, knocks, any unusual noises. And as long as everything's okay, you can drive it, but after 100 miles, you should come back under the car here and check all the fasteners, tighten them down again, and need be apply more Loctite. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully you don't have any bolts or nuts come loose. But anyways, keeping that in mind, I'm gonna move on to the front drive shaft off camera here, and I'll check in with you guys when I'm done. All right, front and rear drive shaft now complete. Got a whole lot of stuff to clean up here, but I did want to take a second, go under the Jeep here just to show you the improvement that this new front drive shaft has made. So let's check it out. So same setup as the rear, except here's the huge thing. Look at how much clearance we now have in between the drive shaft and the exhaust. I can now fit my hand through here very easily, opposed to before where we were making contact. And keep in mind, we have all this clearance even at full extension of the suspension right now. So that's awesome. And additionally, possibly more importantly, look at how effortlessly this double Cardan joint bends for this pretty drastic angle here. This is nothing. This is light work for this joint here. Just looks super robust. Same thing in the rear, of course. So really stoked to have these new drive shafts in. Really wasn't that challenging. The most challenging parts are just stubborn parts that are kind of stuck due to corrosion, but keep with it. Apply some heat, use a good persuader, and everything should come loose just fine. Also, I highly recommend going to AutoZone or a similar place that loans you a puller. Unless you do a lot of this type of work, I really wouldn't suggest buying one. It's free. Go borrow one, bring it back, and get your deposit back. And yeah, definitely don't try to do this without a puller. You'll have a nightmare of a time. But yeah, just prepare well, and it's honestly a pretty easy job. One tip I will say that I found very helpful for the front drive shaft here, it's really difficult to get your tools and whatnot through this little gap here. So I just removed the skid plate here, 4 18mm bolts around the perimeter here. Remove those and drop it right down, and you'll have a lot more room to work here. Highly suggest doing that. All right, so both drive shafts now installed on the Jeep here. As you can see, a little bit muddier than it was at the start of the video. I've actually been driving it for the past 2 or 3 days here. Had a bit of a break between filming just because of Thanksgiving and whatnot. That's when I was filming this video, at least. You're probably seeing it a few weeks later now. But anyways, front drive shaft went in, piece of cake. Went really smoothly, especially after doing the rear drive shaft first. I don't know if it's just in my head, but I swear it feels smoother. It feels like I've taken out some slop in the transmission, and it feels a little bit more responsive. So overall, really happy with the installation of these new rough country drive shafts. No complaints whatsoever. I'm very happy with the improvement, both clearance wise, because they're a much smaller diameter, yet they have thicker walls and they're stronger. And I'm also really happy with the angles at which the dual Cardan joints can flex at. So overall, definitely a must-have upgrade, especially after lifting your Jeep, especially 4 inches or so like I have here. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'd like to pay a huge thank you to Rough Country for making this project possible. They offer an incredible range of parts at very affordable pricing, and above all, Rough Country's customer service goes above and beyond. When you call there with any questions whatsoever, a real human picks up the phone right away. No robots, no nonsense, just true truck and Jeep enthusiasts like you and I. So if you're considering upgrading your Jeep, I definitely highly suggest you go check out Rough Country down in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please go smash that like button. Leave any comments, suggestions, or questions down in the comments. Please subscribe for more Jeep content, and I'll see you guys next time on JD Cars.